Well, we are in the book of Ruth. We've been in the book of Ruth for the last few weeks. We're in chapter 3, and there's sometimes themes that come up in Scripture where I'm uncomfortable, or where I think that's going to be awkward, or how are we going to talk about that? And so this morning we're talking a lot about the S word, and it's just in Ruth 3. It's all over the pages of Ruth 3, and it gets very steamy, and so I just want you to prepare yourselves for the S word to come up a lot, and parents, if you want to cover your children's ears, husbands, if you want to cover your own ears, you're welcome to do that. The S word we're talking about this morning, I'm just going to come out and say it now, is submission. It's worse than you thought, isn't it? Submission is this terrifying word in our culture. It's not a word we like. It's not a word we talk about. It's normally assumed to be a bad thing. And so this morning we're going to hear a lot about the S word and talk about it later when you go home. You can if you need counseling at the end, you're welcome to do that. And so here we go into Ruth 3. It's just going to start. We're just going to hear about it as soon as we get going here. So here we go. Ruth chapter 3, verse 1. One day, Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, said to her, "My daughter, I must find a home for you where you will be well provided for. Now, Boaz, with whose women you have worked, is a relative of ours. Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor. But don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying, then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do." "I will do whatever you say," Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. Okay, so there's a lot going on here. To start out with, Naomi and Ruth. Naomi is the mother-in-law. Ruth is the daughter-in-law. They're both widows. They are in poverty, living in Bethlehem. And she's been gleaning. Ruth has been gleaning to get food. And now Naomi, the mother-in-law, says this to her daughter-in-law. "Oh, Ruth, we have got to find you a husband." I don't know why she sounds like Mickey Mouse, but she does. "Oh, Ruth, we have got to find you a husband." And so there's a bunch of things at play here, and they're all super. First of all, they're super awkward. Then it gets super gross. And then after that, it gets super specific. Okay, a few super things here. But also, it's super compassionate. Naomi is the mother-in-law, and here she is saying to her daughter-in-law, we need to find you a new husband. We need to find you a new home to live into. And she doesn't have to do that. She could say some things like, "Ruth, you're never going to find another man like my son." Or she might say something like, "Don't you dare disgrace my son's honor, his name, by finding someone else. You don't dare move on." But instead she says, "Ruth, we have to find someone for you. You need a husband. You need to be provided for and protected." And so she comes up with this plan for Ruth to follow. Here's what you're going to do. And it's very maybe gross sounding and also specific. They're going to be at the threshing floor. All the men are going to be there. Boaz, the landowner, will be there. And they're going to be working threshing all night. And then here's what you do. You hide in the shadows. And then once he's been eating and drinking and he falls asleep on the barley, then go uncover his feet and lay down and snuggle up to his toes. How sexy does that sound? Right? I mean, he's a hardworking guy, barefoot. I mean, these are dirty, gross, grungy feet. Snuggle up there. Then she says, "Okay, I'll do whatever you say." It sounds kind of gross. And then it's also super, super specific. Naomi knows all these specifics. He's going to be at the threshing floor. He's going to be eating and drinking. There's going to be kind of a party atmosphere happening there because they are, this is it. This is the night where they'll find out how much barley they've harvested, how successful the crop has been. So they're going to be having a good time there. And what I want you to do is, I want you to shower up. Ruth, I want you to be looking and smelling your best and put on some perfume and then go down there. In the NIV, it says put on your best clothes or some good clothes. In Hebrew, it just says put on clothes. Which doesn't mean Ruth has been naked up to this point in the story, right? But I think what it could mean, one possibility is that Ruth has been wearing mourning clothes this whole time, that she's been wearing the clothes of a widow. She's been wearing clothes of grieving. Maybe you think of wearing black or wearing a shawl, something to indicate that she's a widow and in mourning. And so it's possible here that Naomi is saying, okay, that needs to come to an end now. And you'll signify that's done by just putting on regular clothes. So get showered up, put on some perfume, put on some regular clothes, then go and hide in the shadows while these men are celebrating, partying, drinking. Once he's laid down, make sure you know where he's laying, okay, and then you go lie down at his feet. There's all sorts of things going on here, but I'd like to ask the dads, how many of you think this sounds like good dating advice? Anybody? Wait till the guy and his buddies have been having fun and drinking and having lots of good time, and then wait till they pass out, and then lay down at the feet of one of them, and he'll tell you what to do. Any dads? No, this is very bad advice, okay? This is not good advice from any standpoint I'm aware of. It sounds quite dangerous, really. I like that she at least says, make sure you know where he's laying so you don't lie at the feet of some other guy, right? Get the right guy, at least. Because there's a lot of pigs in the barn, right? And so make sure you lay down with the right guy. So there's a ton of things going on here, but it reminds me a little bit of a story all the way back from Genesis 19. And you might know this. Do you know the history of the Moabites? Do you know where they come from? No, okay. So their past is a shady past. And so what happened is the Moabites are from the family of Lot. If you remember Abraham and Lot, they go their separate ways. Lot is living in the towns of Sodom and Gomorrah. Remember, those two towns get wiped out by God, and Lot and his family are spared. They're running away. They're told not to look back. His wife looks back. She turns to a pillar of salt. That's a whole story all on its own. But now Lot and his two daughters are living in a cave. And they're living there and there's no one else around. And the daughters say, you know what we need to do? We need to get dad super drunk and then go in and sleep with him so we can have children. And so that's what the daughters do. The first daughter goes and does that, and she gives birth to a son and names him Moab. The history of the Moabites is not a wonderful, lovely story. It comes from a very shady past, a very broken, awful kind of past. And as we read this, if you're familiar with that story, you think, oh man, what is Naomi suggesting here? What's going to happen here as she does that? There's a lot of debate among scholars about uncover his feet. What does that mean exactly? Uncover his feet. Well, to how far? Like uncover just his toes? Uncover up to his attractive manly calves? Up to his thighs? Are you to uncover a little bit more? There's a lot of debate about how much Naomi was telling him to uncover. But if you look at the account, the integrity of Ruth and Boaz in the story, I think feet fills it in just fine. I don't think there's something nefarious. I don't think there's something sexual happening here. I think she just wants him to uncover his feet and be present there. What does it mean to you if you were to say, lay down at someone's feet? It's not something we would often do. Submission. The S word, right? It's total submission. If you fall at someone's feet, it's like saying, mercy. I give up. I need help. I'm not worthy, right? Any of those things. It makes me think of my family. My parents, you guys have heard this before, but they have dogs. Lots of dogs, okay? Dog family. And you see total submission in these dogs as they just love to lay at my parents' feet, right? And they're perfectly content there, knowing my parents will provide for them. That's why each of these dogs weighs in at about 200 pounds. And so these very content, happy animals, totally submitting willingly to my parents. That's kind of the idea I think we're supposed to get of this submission, that it's a willing submission, that it's saying, I know you, I trust you, I fall at your feet, I feel safe with you. So that's what she goes and does. How many of you would say that Ruth is taking all this instruction from Naomi? How many of you would say you're very good at taking instruction from other people? Don't all raise your hands at once. That was so great. A couple of you are like, what kind of instructions are we taking here? We're not very good at taking instructions because that requires submission. And the antithesis or the counter to submission is in many ways sin. Right? Sin and submission do not go well together. Submission means I'm reliant on you, but sin leads us to be defiant. If faithfulness to God is saying, I submit to you, I'm reliant on you, sin says, I'm defiant. I don't want to do what you're telling me to do it. And we could trace that all the way through the Bible. I mean, we could go back to Genesis 3, where God says, don't eat this fruit. And they say, this fruit looks delicious. It's so fast that we just seem to fight against authority, fight against submitting, fight against not doing whatever we want whenever we want. We struggle to submit because of the other S word, sin. And so we like to do whatever we want to do. And here's part of the challenge with submission is risky and dangerous. It's risky and dangerous because we're submitting to other people at times, people who are sinful, just like us. And so maybe you can think of a time where you say, I put myself under this person's care, their love, their authority in my life, and it did not go well for me. And so we have that, I think, always in the back of our minds. I will submit to you, but I'm going to keep one leg out the door. I'm going to have a plan B and a plan C because I don't know how much I can trust you. Let's keep going with the story of Ruth at verse 7. When Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned, and there was a woman lying at his feet. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am your servant, Ruth," she said. "Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer of our family." Here's a couple questions that come to mind for me, or have come to mind before. Why is Boaz sleeping in the barn? Right? Has he had too much to drink? He can't make the trip home, so he falls asleep here. It's less likely that that's the case and more likely that he's sleeping there to protect the harvest. They're at the threshing floor. It would be this open air room. And there was always the fear, after everyone knows that you've been threshing, once you've brought in the harvest, that thieves would come in to steal whatever they could from you. So in order to not be robbed, Boaz and his other workers are sleeping now at the threshing floor. And while he's sleeping, it says about midnight, he suddenly wakes up, something wakes up, and who's at my feet? Who are you? What are you doing here? Is this a robber who's doing a slow attack, starting with my toes? What is happening here? He calls out. And Ruth could say so many things here. Who are you? Well, I'm the Moabite. I'm the foreigner who doesn't belong here. I've been cut off from my people. Or I'm the widow. I married this guy, and we had great hopes and plans. We weren't able to have children together, and then he died, and now I'm left with nothing. Who are you? I'm the woman who's been busting my butt every single day in the fields, and my mother-in-law hasn't come out once to help us. Who are you? I'm Ruth, your servant. I'm here. I submit. I'm at your beck and call. I've seen you. I trust you. I give up. I don't want to run from you. I want to be here with you. And so she says, spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer. The Hebrew word there is kanaf. It's used 108 times in the Bible. 80 times, instead of saying corner, it actually means wings. Spread the corner of your wings. Spread your wings over me. And earlier, when Boaz first meets Ruth, he says to her that she's come to take refuge under the wings of the God of Israel, that he will shelter her, provide for her, protect her. Up on our back deck, if you ever peek out here, we have two little blue bird houses. And the last 2 years, a family of birds moved in, laid their eggs, and then we've watched with total fascination as this mom and dad are just flying back and forth to bring food for these little chicks. Day after day after day. It seems endless. And those chicks seem totally content because they're under the shelter of their parents who found a place to live. Risky at the Weems house, but they've done it. And then they just trust in these parents. These people have us sheltered under the corner of their wings. This was a common saying for Jewish people, and part of it comes back to this garment. This is called a tallis or a talit, and all Jewish men would have one of these. And this was actually commanded by God that they would wear this, and you can find that in Deuteronomy. And so the instructions were that it needed to be a rectangle garment, and at each corner, the four corners, there would be these. These are called seats. And the instructions are crazy how precise these are, but there has to be a blue thread, and it has to be interwoven in a specific way, and there has to be 5 knots on each side, and all the strands have to be perfect. They can't be flawed or frayed or broken. And each of these corners, somehow, I don't really understand the Hebrew numbering, but it numbers 613, which is the number of commandments Jewish people were trying to follow, that they've been given from God. And so they have a blessing that they would speak each time they would put this on. At prayer times, there's this blessing written in Hebrew here about God, the ruler of the universe. They would kiss it. They would fold it over themselves very clearly or carefully so that this blessing, or the head it was called, would be in front. And then they'd be sheltered here. They'd be under the wings, under the authority of God. They were saying, I'm under the cover of your commandments, all of your commandments to me. And here they're represented for me by these seats, these tassels that are hanging here. And so what Ruth is saying to Boaz is, bring me in under your cover. You're covered by God. I want to be covered over by you. And so what would happen often at Jewish weddings is they would raise one of these up, or they'd have another material they'd put up as a canopy over them. And then they'd wrap the bride and the groom in this, saying, now this couple is covered over together, sheltered under the wings of God. And so it's quite beautiful that Ruth says to Boaz, I want to be under your cover, your care, your protection, under your love. You've been generous with me. I want to continue to experience and benefit from that generosity. Would you wrap me under your wings? She submits to him. I said before that submitting and sin don't go well together, and so we know that Ruth is in danger. We heard that again and again in the last chapter, that she's in danger if she goes to any other field, that she's better staying with Boaz because he's promised to protect her. His men will protect her. We also know that she's in danger of getting married, because not every marriage is perfect. Because in a marriage, there's two sinful people, often bringing their own hopes, dreams, intentions, plans, desires, all those different things together. But here Ruth says, I trust you. I want to be under your care and protection. Here's just a little bit of quick dating advice. Dating advice from the book of Ruth. Here's a couple things. If you are dating someone, here are some things to look for. It's not looks. It's not finances. It is character. What we're told about Boaz the very first time we meet him is that he is a godly man. And then don't just look for someone who says that they're godly, but stick around long enough to find out if they are actually godly in practice. We've heard again and again about Boaz, about how he's godly. We see it how he interacts with other people. We see it in his generosity, his care, his compassion. If you're dating or planning to get married, this would be the great place to start first. Is this person godly? Do they actually live out their faith? And when I'm with them or with the people around them, say that they are kind and compassionate and generous with who they are. Here's another piece of advice. So this is for married couples as well. It's not just the wife that's meant to do the submitting. There has been this, confusion, this warping often in communities, in lots of religious communities, where the wife is meant to submit and be there at my beck and call. If I ring a bell or snap my fingers or clap my hands, she should be there ready with a cold beer and a tray of peanuts for me. And Miranda would do that for me because she loves me. But in reality, the Bible calls us both. That whole passage about submission in Galatians or Ephesians says, first of all, submit one to another. This is about mutual submission where? Under the authority of God. So it's his authority first, and then you submit to each other after that. The other thing she says here that's significant is she calls him a guardian or kinsman redeemer. This was all about carrying on your family's name. And so here's a few things that a guardian or kinsman redeemer would do. They would, if you fell into poverty and sold yourself into slavery, they would buy you back. They would pay the fee to set you free so you wouldn't live as a slave. If you sold your fields, they would buy back your fields so that you had a way to provide for yourself, that you would have the land that was given to your family by God. If your close relative was killed, murdered, you would avenge them. Later on, that goes by going to court, but when it's initially given, it means you find that guy and you kill him. You would avenge this person. And then we're told about if someone dies and don't provide an offspring to the widow, that then this kinsman, this guardian redeemer, would marry the widow to have a male offspring so that he could carry on the name. And so Ruth says two significant things. First, cover me. And secondly, you're my kinsman redeemer. Just in case you didn't know, there's a hope, an expectation that you'll do this. What's interesting is that Boaz is not a close relative, right? Naomi forgot all about him, doesn't know that he exists. And so there's a distance here that probably would have given Boaz the freedom to not honor this request, to say, I know I am a relative, but I'm not actually a kinsman redeemer. I may be too far away, too far removed to do that for you. I love Ruth's sales pitch to him. Think about all the things she offers in this marriage. She says, hey, I'm a Moabite, which means I'm a foreigner. I'm a widow. I'm barren. I'm in poverty, and I'm living with my grumpy mother-in-law. Want to marry me? How's that for us? Oh, well, since you put it that way, that sounds actually pretty good. I've been wanting a grumpy mother-in-law. That would be just great. But think about how crazy that sales pitch is, and then think about our sales pitch to God. What is it that we try and bring to the relationship with God? Hey, God, just so you know, I'm pretty sinful, not super faithful. I don't generally read your word a lot, and when I do, I like to edit it so it fits what I'm doing or what I want to do better. And I'm super committed to you, except when I get a different or better offer, or I don't feel like doing what you've asked me to do, right? I mean, what do I bring to the relationship? Not much. It's an interesting proposition that we bring to God, and yet that's where we see the generosity of Boaz and the faithfulness of God. God says, yeah, I know all those things about you, but I will redeem you. How will I do it? I'll come and become one of you. I mean, that's the whole story of Jesus. Jesus comes to us. We're told in Hebrews that he's not ashamed to be called our brother. Why? Because as our brother, he can be our redeemer. He comes to us to live, die, and rise again for us. The cost that Boaz will have here, if he agrees to this proposal, he'll have some expenses. What's the expense to Jesus? His life. His total life on the cross. He'll live and die and rise again for us. Verse 10 says this. This is Boaz speaking now. The Lord bless you, my daughter, he replied. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You've not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All the people of my town know that you're a woman of noble character. And so he's going to do what he's asked for her. He says, this kindness is better than your first kindness. What's her first kindness? Her commitment to Naomi. Remember that? Naomi, where you go, I will go, and where you die, I'll die. Not even death itself is going to separate us. And so Boaz says, this is even greater. What's greater? Well, she's putting herself under the authority of Jewish tradition here. She's rescuing the family name by proposing. And Jewish women couldn't propose to a man, but they could say this: if you were to propose, I'd be ready for that. Or if you were to propose, you'd probably get a good answer, right? So it was like, it's the pre-proposal. I'm ready for your proposal. Propose to me, things are going to go well for you. And so he says here, this kindness is even greater. You're trying to redeem your dead father-in-law's land, which would mean rescue for Naomi. And an enduring name for the family of Elimelech. So this is even greater than your first kindness. And so he says, I'll do it. I'll buy the land. I'll marry you. I'll take Naomi into my house and provide for her. And I'll give you a male heir. That last one is a super big promise, right? Because as far as we know, she's barren. She's been barren for 10 years, and he says, I'll do it. I will do whatever I can to try and ensure that you have this male heir. Listen to his next words. Although, that's never great when you're getting a proposal. I'll marry you, although that kind of leaves a bit of tension in the air. It is true that I am a guardian redeemer of our family. There is another who is more closely related than I. Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty as your guardian redeemer, good. Let him redeem you. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until morning. This is one of those good news, bad news scenarios. Good news, you're going to get married. Bad news, I'm not sure to who. Right? I'll marry you, or that guy will marry you. I don't know his name. You've never met him before, but one of us is going to marry you and try and help out your family. It's kind of a surprising thing. How well do you think that Ruth slept the rest of that night? On the floor, at this guy's stinky feet, wondering about what have I just done? And then he tells her, stay the night. He doesn't want her to leave while it's dark and she'll be unsafe, but he also wants her to leave before morning so no one sees her and her reputation is at stake. And so here we see not only has Ruth submitted, but Boaz submits. Boaz submits to the rules. Yeah, I'd love to marry you, but I'm not going to break the rules here. There's someone else I need to check with first, and if he wants to marry you, that's okay. So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized and said, no one must know that a woman came to the threshing floor. He also said, bring me your shawl you are wearing and hold it out. When she did so, he poured into it 6 measures of barley and placed the bundle on her. Then he went back to town. When Ruth came to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, how did it go, my daughter? Then she told her everything Boaz had done for her and added, he gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Then Naomi said, wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today. 6 measures. We don't know exactly what measure, but we make a guess here. The first measure would be very small, like, here, don't go until you have this handful of barley. Oh, thanks so much. The next measure would be about 90 pounds, and then the measure after that is just too heavy for her to carry. Imagine first thing in the morning you're given these 6 measures in her shawl, which would be like quite a big piece of material. You sling it over your shoulder, you've been sleeping on the floor all night, and then you lug this 90 pounds back to your mother-in-law. And she says, how did it go? And she's like, look at this. Poof. What I like about that is Naomi came back to Bethlehem and said, I've got nothing. I'm empty. And I think here Boaz is saying, you'll be filled up. You will be filled to overflowing. You won't be able to carry. You won't be able to absorb or consume the blessing that is coming your way. Here's the strangest thing in this whole story in chapter 3. There's this big elaborate plan that Naomi comes up with, and she has to go. Ruth gets dressed up, hides in the shadows, lays at his feet. All that sounds super great, but an easier way, and the normal way, would have been for Naomi just to go talk to Boaz. She could have done that. They didn't have to have this elaborate plan. She just could have gone up like a matchmaker. Remember in Fiddler on the Roof? Matchmaker, matchmaker, make me a match, right? And they could have danced while they were folding the sheets. And anyway, that would have been the normal way to do it. So why does Naomi go through all of this? The best guess is she thinks that there'll be a better outcome this way. That Boaz will have had time to get to know Ruth and to care for her, to love her. That Ruth also maybe will be more open to the plan because she'll have time to have gotten to know Boaz and see his character and integrity, his generosity. And so Naomi kind of orchestrates all of this thing. What's all of this have to do with us? I think for us, the answer is this: submission is the mission. Submission is the mission of Christianity, that we would submit ourselves to Jesus. That we would look at Jesus and say, Jesus, you are better. Jesus, you have a better plan for my life. Jesus, you have a better will. Jesus, you have greater control. Jesus, you are kinder, gentler, greater, more compassionate than anyone else I might ever encounter. Submission is the mission of Christianity, that we would lay down at his feet and say, I'm under your authority now. I want you to shelter me under your wings, and here I will be your servant. I'll do whatever you invite me to do, call me to do, ask me to do. Wherever you send me, I'll go. I am at your feet and at your disposal. Submission would make us reliant on Jesus where sin previously had made us defiant. The challenge is, as Christians, even today, we reject Jesus' authority so often. And remember, this book is being written at the time of the judges where everyone did what? Whatever was right in their own minds. Yeah, this seems right to me, this seems right to me, this seems right to me. And so what we have in the story and what we have today is an environment where all sorts of people are saying, yeah, I'll follow you, Jesus, but not here. I disagree with you on this. I reject your authority on this. And so Jesus says, this is what it will look like to be a Christian. And we say, I kind of disagree with you, Jesus, on that one a little bit. Jesus says, this is what marriage will look like. And we say, I've actually got my own ideas about marriage, and love is love, and you can't tell me what to do there. And Jesus says, this is how you will manage your household and your finances. And we say, Jesus, what do you know about money? You are a poor guy. I've actually got quite a revenue stream coming in here, and so I'm going to do that my way. And Jesus says all these things over here, and we say, yeah, Jesus, I'm totally submitting to you, except you don't know what you're doing, and I have a better plan, better idea, better sense. I talked to a friend. He's very smart. Jesus says, I am the only way to heaven. And we say, well, that's pretty unkind, Jesus. Very narrow-minded of you. What about my atheist friends? They're great. My Hindu friends, my Muslim friends, they're going to go to heaven too. People who are just kind of nice and have no idea about anything and don't care about learning about any of it, all these people are going to go to heaven. And Jesus is kind of left over here going, are you submitting to me or not? Doesn't feel like you're submitting to me very much. Which reminds me a little bit, again, of my parents and their dogs, because my parents are so happy to lay at my dogs are so happy to lay at my parents' feet. And like my parents are in the house and they go to the kitchen and the dogs are right there. And they're trying to go to the bedroom and the dog's right there. And they're trying to go to the bathroom and they're having to push the dogs out the door. And then they go outside and a squirrel runs by and that dog is gone. A rabbit, a bear, and that's kind of like us. We're like, Jesus, I absolutely, while we're in this house, while we're in the church, I am submitting to you. And then we walk out the door with our coffee and our cookie, and we're like, okay, back to my plan. Right? Like, oh, look at that. Oh, that seems interesting. This seems neat. Oh, I want to follow that. I want to do that. And we forget that submission is the mission. And the more we submit to Jesus' authority, the more blessing we'll find in our own lives. And I don't mean it will be easier. I just mean that we'll experience more closeness to Jesus. We'll experience more interaction with him. We'll be more aware of the life that he's calling us to. Not easier, maybe in lots of ways harder, but there will be blessing in that. Why? Because blessing comes through obedience. Submission is the mission. Do you remember at the beginning of this book when they were outside of the will of God, there was famine, and there was death, and there was barrenness, but now that they're back under the wings of God, there has been abundance and hope and possibility. Church, I'd encourage you to stay under the wings, the authority of God, knowing that submission is the mission, that God calls us, Jesus calls us, the Holy Spirit calls us, Scripture calls us to stop running away, to stop living by our own plans and our own playbook, and to actually start following Jesus in every area of our lives. Children who are here, I encourage you to submit to your parents. Reams family, I'm mostly looking at that row, but you can do this to your own kids too. So I encourage you kids to submit to your parents. Teenagers and young adults, do something radical. Submit to your parents. If you're dating, submit your dating life to Jesus. Married people, submit to your spouse. Try and out-submit your spouse. See what shape that takes, what direction that takes your marriage. People, submit to Jesus. Here's the goal. Here's kind of the picture that Jesus gives us of submission. And he's talking specifically here, Paul's talking specifically about married couples. But he says, yes, submit to one another. And then he says, husbands, try and do this. See how Jesus loved the church and he gave himself for her. See if you can outdo that. See if you can follow that model. And if you've done that, then you are winning at the game of submission. Church, submission is the mission. And as you submit to Jesus, you will find blessing and protection and life there. May you come under the shelter, the wings of Jesus. Let's pray together. God, I thank you for this morning, and I thank you for your word in Ruth 3. I thank you that it's living and active. Lord, and that means that it speaks to us today. that this story from thousands of years ago is so relevant for us today. And so I pray that we would not only listen to it as an interesting story, a fun story, a romantic story, but that we would see in this story a picture of your incredible love for us, a picture of how you want to provide and care for us, a picture of a man who is so godly, and yet his generosity and kindness and compassion is nothing compared to yours. Lord, I pray that you would take down the barriers we've set up, the but I can'ts, the reasons, the excuses why we haven't been faithfully following you, and that you would replace that with a desire to be closer to you, to be under your care and protection and authority and leadership. Lord, I pray for each relationship here, whether that's child to parent or dating couple or married couple, or whether it's brothers to sisters, whether that's singles to other friends, for all those different relationships, Lord, I pray that we'd stop fighting so much against submission, and that in submission to those who are, especially to those who are godly, that we would just find incredible blessing there. Lord, and for those who are under our authority, I pray that they would see compassion and mercy and forgiveness demonstrated time and time again. Lord, I pray that this place, this church and this school and this manor would be places known for compassion, and known for generosity, and known for looking and acting and being like you. And so for that to happen, Lord, each of us need to give up some of our defiance and to find blessing in submission. Lord, for those who have been hurt by someone they were submitting to in the past, I pray that you would give them reconciliation and healing and peace. For those who have longed to be married and that hasn't happened, I pray that you would give them comfort, that they'd experience great intimacy with you. Lord, for those who long to have children and that hasn't happened for them, Lord, I pray that again, that you would be the great comforter and they'd find great hope and trust and peace and life in you. Lord, for those who are preparing to be married, I pray that they would look at Ruth and Boaz and see a picture of what submission might look like, and the blessing that would hold for them. Lord, for the young children who are here, for those who aren't even considering dating yet, I pray that when they do, that they would seek someone who's godly first of all. Lord, we give you thanks that even though we don't bring anything to the table, that you love us, that you choose us, that you delight in us, that you've come to us to rescue us in Jesus, and that he has paid the price in full for our freedom, for our life, and that he's invited us to your table to dine and celebrate forever. And so I pray if there are people here who are on the fence, who are unsure, who don't know you yet, Lord, I pray that they would come to know you, that you'd speak to them in a powerful way, and that they would submit to you, knowing that would be the best move they could ever make in their lives. Everything else, God, in our hearts and minds, we commit all those things to you, trusting in your Son, Jesus, who taught us to pray.